All right, we are live.
Thank you, Jen. I'm still seeing no attendees. This is a regular meeting of the Fairhaven Planning Board. Adequate notice of this meeting has been given pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act. At the time of the board reorganization in January of this year, the board adopted its regular meeting schedule for the year. Notice of the schedule was sent to and published in the Asbury Park Press and was also sent to the Two River Times and the Star Ledger. That notice was also posted on the bulletin board in the Borough Hall and has remained continuously posted there as required by the statute. A copy of the notice is and has been available to the public and is on file with the Office of the Borough Clerk. A copy of the notice has also been sent to such members of the public as have requested such information in accordance with the statute. Adequate notice having been given, the board secretary is directed to include this statement in the minutes of the meeting. Doug, before we do roll call, do we need anything further with regard to the Zoom, the remote nature of this meeting?
No, the notice that has been posted, I think the statement is adequate.
Very good. Jen, roll call, please.
Mr. Bordelon?
Dave, you have to, okay, there you go.
Yep, just got it here.
Mr. Borneo?
Here.
Mr. Folker?
Here.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Mrs. Koch?
Here.
Mr. Newell?
Here.
Mr. Sobel?
Here.
Mr. Rolfe?
Here.
Mr. Criscola? Mr. Paolo?
Here.
Mr. Leader?
Here. Please join me in a pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, somebody really messed that up. I don't know who it was, but we've got that all recorded. We'll have to go back and check it out. Not synchronized.
I know the word.
Not synchronized. Okay, we have one matter of new business and then administrative items tonight. The new business is River Road 756 LLC, aka China Closet. I see 4 attendees, including Rick Brodsky. Can we invite them, Jen, to the panel?
Brought over as a panelist now.
Rick, we have there now. You're not muted. We have
Yeah,
no video.
thank you. Here we are.
Good
Mr.
evening.
Brodsky, is there anyone else that's an attendee that you want me to bring over?
Walt Hopkin,
Okay.
who I understand is on. Excellent. Hey, Walt, how are you? And Frank Cacavo.
Did Frank join?
Rick?
I'm here.
Okay, now I got video. I don't know about, or rather audio. I don't know about video.
We can see you.
We got
We can
Frank.
see, we can
Perfect,
see the
okay.
top half of your head.
Is
There
that
you
better?
There you go.
Yes. All right.
Okay, we good to go?
We're good to go, Rick. We've got four members of your team. I'm going to ask the planning board members to please mute your microphones. Mr. Kovacs, can we go through jurisdiction?
Sure. Dan, can you confirm that we have jurisdiction? You've had an opportunity to review the 200 list and the mailings and the materials provided?
Yes, I did. We're good to go.
Okay. May I do a couple of other housekeeping matters if I can, Mr. Lair. If Mr. Brodsky has no objection, what I would like to do is take the August 10th transmittal letter of the planning board secretary, which listed all of the documents from 2018, 2019, and 2020, and use that as an exhibit list. I think the only thing we need to add to that as item number 22 would be the August 17 technical review letter of our engineer. Other than that, if I can swear the witnesses right now, then I can jump off and get out of the way of the hearing. May I ask that anyone that's going to testify, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give before the board to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. May I ask that before you testify that you spell your last name, follow directions of your counsel? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kovats. Thanks, Jen. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Rick Brodsky. I'm a shareholder with the law firm of Ansel, Grimm and Aaron on behalf of the applicants, River Road 756 LLC. The application pertains to the property that's located at 756 River Road, right across the street from Town Hall. The building has existed for quite some time. The last tenant, the most current tenant who no longer occupies, was a retail business called China Closet. That business has since vacated, and the property is currently vacant. There is no tenant at the site currently. There are no leases signed with respect to the property. Prior to the China Closet, other uses in the past had to do involve real estate brokerage, residential real estate brokers, and some other office uses as well. So a lot of the exhibits that Mr. Kovats had marked and have been submitted in connection with this application, we're not going to refer to many of them because the circumstances have changed dramatically since the start, in as much as the building is no longer occupied. And the applicant is marketing the property for permitted use in the zone. But for now, what had happened in the past was that because there were some questions about outstanding site issues stemming back to the last approval that was granted, an amended minor site plan back in January of 2000, 20 years ago. And so the purpose of the application this evening is, it's technically, I guess, an amended site plan approval, and it's basically to reconcile the current conditions at the site with that approval that was granted for minor site plan back in 2000. We don't have a use, so we're not talking about a use, and we understand, the applicant understands that the relief here this evening would be limited to that amended site plan approval pursuant to the plan, the amended plan that's been submitted and that Mr. Hopkin will testify to in a moment. And there is a single variance associated with the request, and that is, and you'll hear from Mr. Hopkin, it's with respect to the fence height. The trash enclosure, refuse enclosure, and also HVAC enclosure. The fence that's proposed is a 50% open fence as required by your ordinance, but it's proposed at 48 inches rather than 42 inches, which is what your ordinance permits. And you'll hear the basis for that request during Mr. Hopkins' testimony. So that's where we're at. There is some history here, but a lot of it has been moot because we're now left with just simply dealing with our site issues. The applicant has been working with your engineer, borough engineer, as well as the building department in terms of the compliance, site plan compliance. Some items have already been addressed. Most have, as you'll see from Mr. Gardella's both his August 17 report and his June 18 report, and the planner's report. And there's a couple of things, some striping that is proposed as part of the shown on the plan that you guys have before you. So again, what I'd like to do, unless the board has any questions, is I'd like to get Mr. Hopkins. He's already sworn, but he can just provide his credentials for the board as an expert, both as an engineer and as a planner, to walk the board briefly through the site as it exists, and which is essentially consistent with the plan that's proposed as part of the application.
Mr. Brodsky, let me just jump in and make sure that we all know where we are.
Sure.
The January 2020 approval is from this planning board, right?
Yes.
And is that the original approval for the development of the building, or was that an approval for a particular occupant?
That was the approval. There was some site work done at the time, and it was for a particular user.
Okay. And is that still operative? And would it be worthwhile to go through the requirements of that resolution and make sure that we're in compliance, or is that really the nature of what it is that you're here tonight to discuss?
That's really is the nature. I mean, Mr. Hopkins will reference it so that we can establish that what's out there and what's proposed is in full conformance with that original approval. So we will hit that as he goes through it, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. And does anybody have the ability, I don't know, Mr. Brodsky, if you understand, but the board received over 120 pages of materials dating over about 36 months.
I see that.
So I made a sincere effort to get through it today, but was unable to get through it all. And when you reference a site plan, there were multiple site plans in that package, and I'm wondering whether or not we're going to be posting things on the screen so people can follow along.
Yeah, Mr. Hopkins, during his testimony, would be happy to post his plan that's before you that we're seeking approval for.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Brodsky.
Sure. Okay, Mr. Hopkins, if you would, you've already been sworn. If you would just give the board the benefit of your background and experience as both a licensed engineer and a professional planner here in the state of New Jersey.
Sure. I haven't had the privilege of testifying before Fairhaven on the board. However, I'm a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey. I'm a certified municipal engineer in the state of New Jersey. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the states of New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland. I received my Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Drexel University. Again, I haven't testified before your board. I have been accepted in many municipalities throughout Monmouth and Ocean counties, including Rumson, Long Branch, Marlborough, Freehold, and dozens others.
Do any board members have any questions or comments with regard to Mr. Hopkins' qualifications? We'll accept Mr. Hopkins.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I think you asked me to spell my last name. It's Hopkin.
Okay, Mr. Hopkins, if you would, you heard my intro, and I suspect you're not going to be referring to all of the documents that have been marked and submitted over the last 3 years. So I think it's the most recent documents that I believe are relevant for our purposes this evening. So I guess, you know, in referencing whatever exhibits you'd like to reference, I suspect you'd want to start out with the plan that's before the board this evening.
Yes, and with the chairman's permission, I'd like to share my screen to show you a PDF of the plan before the board for their consideration this evening.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Okay. So hopefully you can see my screen now with the amended site plan.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so that's the plan that's before you this evening for consideration. It's prepared by our office. It's dated March 5th, 2020.
And excuse me, Walt, just for purposes of the record, Mr. Kovacs, are we going to use the exhibit numbers in your list in Jennifer's letter?
Mr. Kovacs, you're muted.
This would be A21.
Thank you. Okay, Walt, you can go ahead.
So I'm sure the board is familiar with the site, but just as a formality and for the record, I'll quickly orient the board. What I'm referring to is the is A28, I believe you had indicated.
21.
21, I'm sorry. And this is our existing conditions map. The site is an 8,973 square foot site. The address, of course, is 756 River Road. It's located at the southeast corner of River Road and Fairhaven Road. It's also known as Block 52, Lot 1, and it's located in your B1 zone. Just to orient the surrounding uses, to the north across the street would be the Lupa Pizza across River Road. To the south, of course, is Nauvoo. To the east over here would be the gift shop. And to the west across on the other side of Fairhaven Road is the hardware store. What I'm referring to here is the existing site. So it's an approximately 1,376 square foot building, which is 2 stories. It was last occupied by the China Closet, which was a retail use. There are 14 parking spots that exist on the site, one of which is handicap accessible. There is an existing handicap ramp leading to the sidewalk along River Road into the entrance of the building. There was a comment raised in Mr. Gardello's review letter with regard to the status of that handicap ramp, the accessibility. I believe it's the applicant and their architect's position that due to the nature of the improvements, and really there's no improvements proposed, that it does not require upgrading. However, it's up to the board and their discretion and anything that they would like to ask with regard to that. The site was and is currently proposed to circulate in a one-way manner in off of River Road and out through Fairhaven. There are foundation plantings and some landscaping along River Road, and there's some shrubs and trees and landscape islands along Fairhaven Road. There are building mounted, there's a building mounted light in the rear of the building. There's a light along the property line, along the eastern property line. There are 2 lights on the Nauvoo property, and although not directed towards our property, do cast light onto the parking lot. And there is an existing Cobra head that's mounted on a utility pole along Fairhaven Road. I visited the site last night and did find that the lighting for the proposed use was adequate. The refuse and recycling currently, last night it was actually out, and it is in this area by the handicap ramp. I believe it was placed in that area to kind of keep it out of sight. And what's being proposed, which I'll get to in a second, would be to relocate that to a screened area along Fairhaven Road. As Mr. Brodsky had indicated, and the chairman, I believe, referenced, there was an approval in 2000. That approval is very similar to what you see before you tonight. There was a minor discrepancy with regard to the curb line along the eastern property line. But the dimensions and the circulation remain, proper and adequate. There were, I believe, 9 conditions in that 2000 planning board resolution. I don't know if the board and the chairman would like me to go quickly through those and give you a status update of where they are today.
Yes, please.
Sure.
Okay. So the first condition of that January 24th, 2000 resolution was the signing of a recordable cross easement with Richard Bahadorian, which I believe is the owner of Nauvoo. It's my recollection, it's actually my testimony that I've seen that easement has been recorded. The placement of a second floor window on the south side of the building in order to enhance aesthetic appearance. I don't know what was there in 2000, but I can tell you that there are two second floor windows along the southern facade. Dedication to the borough of right-of-way.
Mr. Hopkins,
yes,
Mr. Hopkins, I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't know, we have a 4th member of your team, or I guess a 3rd member of your team. Is that the owner, and is this the same ownership as 2000, or have we turned this property over since it was?
Oh, Mr. Chair, yes, that's Mr. Cacavo. He's the 3rd member of our team. He is a representative of the current owner, I forgot to mention. which is the applicant. The applicant acquired the property on September 1st, 2017.
17, thank you.
Yes.
So there, you don't actually have any direct knowledge of what window was proposed or whether or not you're technically in compliance?
We don't, but we know that there are two existing in the building on the south side.
Dedication to the Borough of right-of-way, I can in fact confirm that that has been recorded. Conveyance of a site triangle easement, again, that has been recorded. Compliance with the recommendations of a T&M Associates letter from 1999. I was not able to confirm that. I just simply didn't have a copy of that letter. Stranger things have happened, but I would assume that since the building was occupied, that those conditions were substantially met. And the remaining item was a payment for escrow. I don't know if that was accomplished back then, but I do know that the escrow account has been brought currently. Submission of floor plans for review and approval. Again, since they took occupancy, it would be my assumption that those were submitted and were acceptable. And again, to the building official for a sign package. Again, I would assume that would have been accomplished. And the 9th was receipt of all additional government approval. I don't know what else would be required with a project of this size, but I know that we have sought Monmouth County approval, and they've actually issued a letter of exemption.
Mr. Brodsky, can I suggest, just to keep things in order, Mr. Gardella and Mr. Kovatz may have some comments or questions with regard to compliance with the 2020 reso before we move on to anything further?
Okay.
Mr. Kovatz first, did you identify anything in your review that wasn't touched on or that you want to add?
No, not as a result of the resolution.
Mr. Gardella? Are you able to add any additional information?
No, as the applicant had stated earlier, we have been working with them to seek compliance, so no further comments.
And you didn't work on this project, right? This predates you?
This predates me, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay to proceed to
Yes.
what's proposed, Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Sure.
thank you.
Okay. So what's proposed, I'll flip the page here. You won't see much of a difference. However, we are proposing some arrows to help with directional, to enhance the one-way nature of this property. There is a 48-inch open picket fence that's proposed in this area. There's existing a current concrete slab for the air conditioners. There is ample room for on that slab to accommodate the refuse and recycling container. And in my review of the 2020 2000 site plan approval, the plans back then also indicated a fence in this area. I can't confirm what the height of it was, but there was a fence proposed at that time. Currently, there is no fence. It's just a concrete slab. So we propose a PVC, which is a durable type of material, 48 inches high in this area. And the reason that we're requesting the variance is that the borough's refuse containers are approximately 43 inches high. So the 42 inches wouldn't quite conceal them. That's really the practical reason. There'll be no tree removal necessary for this. That slab exists, and this fence will go right on the edge of the slab. They are 1.5 inch pickets with 1.5 inches between each picket. So it does comply with your ordinance. And the only other really items that are proposed is we did add a note as requested, I believe it was by Mr. Gardella's office, that all trees and shrubs to be kept either low or high for sight distance. Because it is on a corner and we do have driveways, that's important. The applicants indicated that has been accomplished. I haven't verified that, but if it hasn't occurred already, we would certainly accept that as a condition of approval. There was also a question about the sidewalk along Fairhaven Road and the width. So the width currently exists, and it's 4 feet. as you can see, this is entirely within the borough's right-of-way. So there is an area here where there's a light pole and utility pole. It's less than 4 feet there, but any ability to widen this is within the borough's right-of-way. So really, it's not something that would be able to be accomplished by the applicant. That's really all I have for the existing conditions, how they relate to the 2000 approval and what's being proposed today. I'd be happy to either answer any questions, get into the letters, or however the board would like to proceed.
Yeah, Mr. Hopkins, maybe if you would just go through Mr. Gardella's letter. Actually, I believe, and Rich, Mr. Gardella, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that we've, most of the items in your letter have been addressed in terms of plan revisions and so forth, and notes. As to the ADA, yeah, I mean, there's a question as to whether it's compliant or not. We think it is, but I know that's something that the applicant will work with your office and the building department and will do whatever is required if there is anything additional that needs to be done with regard to ADA. And I think, was there anything else, Rich, that was in your letter that we needed to comment on?
You know what I can do? I could pull it up if Mr. Hopkins wants to drop his, there you go. Let me share this. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is the most recent one.
Yeah, this is the one that
August
came out
17th.
today.
Okay.
These comments were in my completeness review letters, except for the last item, number 5. We're just looking for the appropriate signage to be installed, and striping needs to be freshened up. And I think you also show some directional arrows, pavement
Yes.
markings.
That's correct.
And then, like you said, the item regarding the ADA, you know, at the time of occupancy, they're going to have to get a commercial CO. So if the building department or our office needs to further review that, we can certainly work with your applicant on that.
That's fine. That's fine.
And
then-
I believe
Go ahead.
the other, I think the other items, the testimony was provided.
And just with regard to the signage, Mr. Hopkins, you understand the signage? Is that with regard to the ingress and egress onto the site?
I do, and actually, I'm glad, Mr. Gardella, that you reminded me, because it would have gone on our plans anyway. There appears to have been there should be a do not enter sign and a stop sign on Fairhaven Road,
Right.
and there's a sign post with no sign on it. So we'll make sure that that post gets my suspicion is that it'll be a stop sign on one side and a do not enter on the other. And we'll make sure that that's added to our plans and part of the site plan.
Okay, easy enough. That's all I had.
Questions for Mr. Hopkins from the board?
Can I ask about the location of the air conditioning units in the area that's proposed to be fenced?
Yes.
Is it safe to assume that that was the location selected and approved in 2020? I'm sorry, 2000?
2000.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
And with regard to the proposed fencing, are you proposing to enlarge the area and install any new equipment? It's really 2 questions. Or are you simply fencing around the existing pad so you can cover what's already there?
Simply fencing around the existing pad.
And with regard to the site triangle, I don't see it on this plan. Is it shown here?
That's a good pickup, Mr. Chairman. We did not do the original survey, but we will make sure that it's shown on this plan.
How big is the site triangle?
These are good questions.
I'll do it this way. Mr. Gardella, I'm just, site triangles are really important. This is a really busy intersection. There's a lot of stuff going on right here. The fact that the board in 2000 had required it is important. I would just ask that you please make sure that we're in compliance and that all the landscaping is at the appropriate height and that we don't have any improvements located within the site triangle.
And
I'm not saying that there are, I don't know.
And I missed the last comment. My understanding, the site triangle is not indicated on the plan?
That's correct.
We're going to add it. It is recorded. It is recorded.
No problem. Okay, yeah, I'll make sure of that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Rich, it's not that it be on the plan. I just wanted a little bit of attention to whether or not it's being complied with and make sure it is.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other board members with any questions? Betsy, I see you're talking, but you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I have a question. Prior to the China Closet taking occupancy of that building, the parking lot behind the building, it was a real estate agency owned it. And it was available for residents to use it for parking, whether they were going to Nauvoo or to the Raven and the Peach, or after hours, they were going to the hardware store. Have your clients indicated what they intend to do with that parking lot after hours? Will that be available for residents of Fairhaven to use, or is it going to be closed off?
Well, I don't know about residents, but there is a parking agreement that is of record, which was a condition of the approval back in 2000.
Right, with Nauvoo, right?
Yes. And so that's the only agreement, and that agreement is of record and does speak to a shared parking arrangement with Nauvoo, or with Bahadorian, to be utilized as part of the restaurant.
So that will still be honored.
That agreement is recorded back in 2001 and remains unchanged.
Okay. Because the Cacavos at one point put cones across their driveway and would not allow people to park there. And then they had a conversation with Mr. Bahadorian, who said he would only allow valet parkers to put a car there. So I don't know if you're aware of that or if you had a conversation with your clients about that. But what you're saying is that it's going to be an open parking lot after hours for people who wish to use Nauvoo.
No, what I'm saying is there's a parking agreement that is of record that was reviewed and approved and recorded back in 2000 between this property owner and the owner of that restaurant. And the agreement is limited to the sharing of parking between those two parties.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep. And that agreement is of record. It's never been changed, and
It will be
its
honored.
terms remain unchanged.
Regardless of the transaction, it will still be honored.
The terms of that agreement will be honored.
Any other board members have any questions for Mr. Hopkin?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Kovacs.
will Mr. Hopkins be going through the planner's review also?
Yes, we're going to do that right now.
I'll hold off any questions.
Mr. Hopkin, you've had a chance to review the higher rule letter report as well, dated July 31, 2020.
Yes, I have.
Yes. Any issues or raised in that report that you need to address?
I believe I've hit them all with the exception.
There is a good deal of overlap between that report and Mr. Gardella's report.
Yeah, with the exception of, I guess there was a typographical error with regard to the floor areas. We did not double it, so we will update the zoning table accordingly. And as the planner has indicated, it doesn't trigger any variances or anything like that. It's just a
Right.
typographical house cleaning item.
That's right. And then again, there is reference to the variance, and frankly, Mr. Chair, with regard to the requested variance for the fence, which is raised in the planner's letter as well, we'll abide by the board's preference, but you heard the rationale or the reason why we've proposed a 48-inch fence as opposed to a 42. But there's no fence there now, and the applicant is agreeable, if the board is not inclined to grant that variance, to put it 42, but he thinks it looks better and serves its purpose better if we can bump it to 48.
Mr. Brodsky, can we get the details on that fence? I saw there was a photo of it. Is it 50% open? I heard that it was vinyl. I didn't hear anything. I don't remember anything more than that.
Yes, I'm going to try to, with your permission, Mr. Chair, I'll bring up the screen again.
Sure.
And yes, it is PVC. It is, the pickets themselves are 1.5 inches square with 1.5 inches between them. I'm trying to get you a little better shot here.
Can you enlarge it?
That's what I'm trying, yeah. Might be beyond the resolution capabilities of my computer. And I believe your historic commission has also reviewed this, and I think their recommendation was that there's a treatment that doesn't quite give it, that gives it a little bit more of a wood look to it, and that we would change this detail to show that type of treatment.
Has anybody been through the 2000 resolution to see what was required? I'm really questioning the location of the equipment, the need for the fence. I understand since the equipment is there, but if it's there, I'm wondering why we didn't just go privacy. I mean, the 50% open in this case just lets us see 50% of the equipment.
Mr. Chair, I agree with you, and we agree, and if the board is inclined, we just propose that because that's what the ordinance requires. But we're happy to close that up.
Well, I'm never short of an opinion, Mr. Brodsky, but I am interested in capturing the spirit of the original resolution. Is there any detail in there about what they wanted?
No.
Can I speak for a second? It's Frank.
Absolutely.
Sure.
So we took down, I'm the owner of the building, Frank Acavo. If anybody's got any question, feel free to ask it. But we took down a 5-foot tall wood stockade fence that was literally falling over and rotting, and proposed to put a solid PVC fence back up in its stead. We originally had been granted the permission to do that. Then the permit was rescinded, saying that the town's requirements code required 50% open, and that's what stalled everything, because there was a fence there. It was an eyesore. It was literally leaning on the equipment and part of it falling on the ground, and in an attempt to just clean it up and restore the, what I think is proper aesthetics, we removed it and we're going to replace it. I don't care if you guys want a solid fence, I'll put solid. If you want the 50% open, that's what we've proposed. I'm fine with that. So whatever you want as far as a fence goes, I'm game.
But Frank, the one that you said was there when you bought the property, it was the 5-foot wood fully enclosed.
Yeah, it was, well, it was you couldn't see through it. It was a solid wood picket stockade fence.
Okay.
Do any other board members have any comments with regard to this fence?
I would say if you're looking to cover unsightly garbage cans or AC units on a side of a building, you would go with a closed fence, not an open fence.
This is Andrew. Frankly, I think the fence ordinance has to be complied with, and if that means an open 50% open fence, that's what has to be done. That's what's done throughout the entire town, including in the residential district. I believe that it should be uniform with the business district as well.
Mr. Sobel, we have the authority to grant the variance. I mean, the ordinance technically requires 42 inches. The proposal is 48 to be able to cover the top of the can. We could certainly grant the variance for the full privacy. What do you think aesthetically it would look better, or do you think the uniformity of it? I can't think of anywhere else where anybody has these sorts of improvements this close to the road anywhere in the business district.
I mean, is it necessary for the garbage to go, along the Fairhaven Road? I mean, is that the only possibility?
Again, it's Frank. Historically, that's where they're kept. Everybody up and down Fairhaven Road on the business district keeps them on that side. That's where they were kept, prior to us buying the building and during the China Closet's tenancy. There's really no other good spot for them. And there is a tree and some shrubs there. It is not a directly visible and sore thumb type of view. It's certainly no more offensive or worse than some of the other trash cans around town that are more prominently displayed than they are at 756.
Look, I think we have an ordinance that requires that the garbage cans be out of sight. Compliance of other property owners with that ordinance aside, I don't think this is the preferred location, but this whole site has been laid out to maximize parking. The back rear left corner would be the better place for all of this, but that's not how it's set up. It was not required by the planning board 20 years ago. And I'm understanding the pad is there. So you wind up with a fence that's virtually the same size anyway. Questions whether or not you're going to require a second area to be created, it would seem.
Mr. Chairman, it's McKinley here. Do you mind if I pop in?
That'd be great.
I think from our perspective, and just everyone, hi, I'm McKinley. I'm standing in for Elena tonight. From our perspective, from a planning perspective, we have two conflicting borough ordinance regulations happening here: the need to screen refuse and recycling containers and the desire to keep these aesthetic 50% open, shorter fences in these front yard areas. Plus, it's a corner lot, and as the chairman said, this property has been developed for at least 20 years, and it was developed in a way to maximize parking. So from our perspective, and when I first looked at this, I thought the same thing, Mr. Chairman. You said they're not really screening the containers here by putting this fence in. It's a nice looking fence, but I think it would be appropriate to have to allow the height to cover the refuse and to provide something that has a little bit more screening, because ultimately we're not achieving that. And I think from my perspective, that's more important at this location, is to provide an attractive way to screen refuse, recycling, and HVAC so that it's less visible from the street. So I would be okay moving forward if with the two variances, I guess, as opposed to the one, providing appropriate screening. I think given the location, the corner location, it just makes more sense for the site.
Thank you, McKinley.
Yeah, and the applicant is fully, as I mentioned at the outset, applicant is fully agreeable to providing that fully enclosed 48-inch fence.
So we've got an opinion from Mr. Newell, from McKinley, and from Mr. Sobel. Does anyone else have an opinion? If you assume for a second that we could do either one as to which one's more appropriate here?
I thought McKinley brought up a good point in that it looks like they're coming in with, in a sense, 2 variances, and this is the place and the time to apply for the variances. And the solid fence would do a better job of protecting or preventing the site of the HVAC and the 2 garbage bins.
Thank you.
Everyone else is completely neutral on this subject.
Yes.
I do have a question. If that fence went up, how difficult would it be for the people who are collecting trash to access those trash cans?
Betsy, this is Frank. The tenants historically wheel the containers out from behind the fence and to the curbside, and after they're picked up, they're put away again. So that won't change that, and that won't make it any more a solid fence or a 50% open is not going to impact that.
Okay, but you said historically. Is there any guarantee that future tenants will do that?
Well, from a practical matter, the garbage collection does not come onto the site as far as I'm aware, anywhere in the town and pick stuff up, other than if you have a dumpster. So we never intend to have a dumpster there. And it's the tenant's responsibility. It will continue to be to have to put their trash and recycling out at curbside on the days of pickup and restore the cans. I mean, that's a site.
That would just be a part of their
Lease, be
agreement
written into the lease.
as part of their tenancy. That would be an agreement they make.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would be something that I would absolutely enforce. I mean, they're
Okay.
not going to be allowed to just let it sit there and be an eyesore. That's completely contrary to my belief on how things should look.
I just want to point out that whatever we do tonight and whatever we approve in the resolution, it's going to say that we've approved this type of fence to be installed and maintained. And whatever Mr. Is it Corcovado?
Cacavo, but Frank's good enough.
I was trying to be polite. You shouldn't have to have that problem when you go to replace or maintain the fence. So the resolution is going to be clear that what you install, you can install and maintain and eventually replace in like kind. So what we're doing is figuring out what it's going to be from here on out.
Thank you.
Fair enough.
All right, no one else cares about the fence. I guess we'll deal with that at the end.
Mr. Chairman, this is Michael Borneo. I just want to confirm. So we're talking about garbage cans that are consistent with the residential garbage cans in town. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes, it is. Yes,
So
it is.
it's the blue and gray garbage cans that are in front of everybody's house.
Yes, sir.
Whatever day you have to put out your garbage cans. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Given that, I would be inclined to vote for a solid fence at 48 inches as well. I mean, if the purpose is to conceal them because they're right on Fairhaven Road, let's conceal them. It doesn't make any sense to put up a fence that is only going to do half the job.
Agreed.
I just want to clarify, Mr. Borneo, that in addition to storage of the garbage cans, this is actually a location where the AC compressors are. So there's other equipment for the building there, which is why we've talked about a lot of the garbage cans and concealing them. It's that other equipment which is really causing this to be the permanent location for those things.
That's right.
Yeah, I understand that. In fact, I went by the building today just to see what it looked like actually in person, and I did observe those AC units, and from what I was able to observe, it did look like that was the appropriate place to put garbage cans. And seemed like a solid fence would do the job to conceal both the cans as well as the AC units.
Thanks, Mr. Bourne.
Would this fence be far enough from the air conditioning unit to allow for free airflow? Do we have a?
Yes.
Okay.
Jim, I don't know if you heard me, but yes, they will be.
Okay.
All right. What else do we have, Mr. Brodsky?
That's all I have at the moment. That's all I have, Mr. Chair, unless there are any other questions.
So, Mr. Brodsky, can we summarize what it is that you're proposing tonight? This project has a tortured history, but we're obviously dealing with a fence and 1 or 2 variances for the installation of a replacement. But what exactly, or beyond that, what are the technical details? There was some write-up with regard to lighting being insufficient. We've kind of touched on it, but it's not clear to me that any prior site plan required it.
Yeah, there was no prior requirements as to lighting, but as Mr. Hopkin indicated earlier, he did visit the site in the evening, and it was his opinion that the lighting was perfectly adequate for the parking lot. Is that right, Mr. Hopkin?
That's correct.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, to answer your question in terms of what we're seeking here tonight, in addition to the 1 or 2 variances for the fence, it's really just, I guess, amended minor site plan approval to I guess, reconcile the existing condition of the site with the prior approval so that there are no outstanding site issues, and that the board finds that the site is in compliance, consistent with the 2000 resolution, consistent with the plan that's been submitted, that will be of record with the town. And so kind of get that resolved so that, the next step is going to be, hopefully in the near future, there's going to be a tenant that's going to come, that's going to be interested in occupying the existing building as it exists today, and is going to submit for a change of use. And that's going to be analyzed pursuant to your normal procedures. But that analysis and that review is not going to get bogged down, if you will, with, unresolved site issues. That's really the way I see what the application is that we're seeking. The amended minor site plan, all site issues are resolved once we do everything that's set forth in the plan. And this way, a tenant that comes along next week, next month, hopefully, is just going to be dealing with a compliant site, and we'll just go through your professional reviews in terms of change of use application.
I have one question. This is Andrew. Mr. Concalvo, is that correct?
Concalvo, but you can call me Frank too.
All right, Mr. Frank. Do you have any proposed tenants that are looking at it? Any interest, or you're just trying to get as marketable as possible, and then you'll start marketing it?
Well,
yeah, if you guys have any prospective tenants, refer them to Frank.
Exactly. We've had people look at the building. I've got nobody who, at the moment, who wants a lease and wants to lease the building. We had Berkshire Hathaway for the whole building, but they were unfortunately delayed beyond being able to stay alive for the building. COVID coupled with Berkshire Hathaway acquiring Gloria Nielsen and expanding in the area. They were two separate franchisees, so they're no longer a viable tenant for the building. I'm seeking others.
Thank you for your honesty, because usually sometimes what happens here is we go through this song and dance, and then we get a tenant that comes in and there's changes that need to be made, but I thank you for your honesty.
You're welcome, and
Yeah.
I've been accused of being brutally honest, and that gets me in trouble at home sometimes.
And Mr. Sobel, if we understand that, if a tenant comes along, like I said, tomorrow or next week, if it's not approved as a change of use administratively, we would have to come back to the board, but that is what it is.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I have a question. This is Bill Folker. How many tenants could you have in the building? 1, 2, 4, 6?
Bill, my preference would be to have 1, but certainly no more than 2.
That's okay. Thank you. That's what I thought. Thank you.
So, Mr. Gardella, I just want to clarify for you, because we really buzzed right through all that, and we didn't talk about any issues with regard to compliance, the site plan requirements. So I guess what I'm left to understand is that the process of working through this application to get here tonight has led to your analysis, their response, the checking off of the boxes such that they've already committed to satisfy those things for you. And that's the reason we haven't really discussed it in any greater detail. Is that fair?
That is correct. Yeah, that is fair.
All right. And is there anything, Mr. Gardella, recognizing that the applicant is soliciting a tenant now and is likely going to find one soon, without knowing the specific user, is there anything that you would recommend? Moving forward, it would be more efficient if they were able to administratively approved as an exempt development, a new user, but the site conditions are going to be an impediment to that if we don't at least think about what may need to be current. For instance, the handicapped access. Are there any other things that you've noted? Lighting was referenced. Anything that's inadequate or that needs to be upgraded so as to maybe avoid a future site plan?
No, I think the purpose of tonight was to kind of like reconcile that prior approval from 2000. We had been working with the applicant for the last couple of years to try to get that into compliance and conformance. And until we know a use or proposed use, they can certainly submit to zoning when they have one, and we can review it administratively. And if it meets the requirements of the ordinance and it also meets the definition of exempt development, we can certainly help them through that process administratively. So I have no further concerns. The site has been in existence for well over 20 years. I think the important thing was to put back the parking the way it was originally designed, with the access off River Road and the exit out onto Fairhaven, and also the angled parking. Because through the years, somehow it became a two-way with perpendicular spaces and no signage.
I have one question, if I can.
Please.
This is David Paolo. Do we know the condition of the sidewalk on the Fairhaven Road side? If memory serves, if I've been past there on bike rides, there may be some loose or maybe roots that are affecting some of the bricks there. But my memory could be hazy, and I'm thinking that's by Nauvoo and not by this particular property. Do we know off the top of our head what the condition of the sidewalk is?
I did raise something in my review letter. Let me just pull that up. Hold on just a sec. I had called out that it didn't appear to be proper width. There's a utility pole kind of like right in the middle of the sidewalk. I think we kind of breezed through that comment. We understand it's in the right of way, but typically, well, actually, I don't know the history of the sidewalk. I don't know who installed the sidewalk. I don't know if it was part of this application 20, 25 years ago. But I can tell you the borough has no intent on doing any work on that side. We are going to come back, actually, and I had mentioned this to the applicant's attorney earlier today. We're going to be doing a streetscape project on River Road, and I included additional quantities to come back and fix some of the problematic areas within the downtown district. So if you're on River Road, some of the sidewalk is in need of repair. So we'll be coming through in the coming months and taking care of that, but nothing on Fairhaven Road at this time. So I don't know if the applicant has anything.
But the applicant had mentioned that there's additional width there, but it's within the right of way. And I think the implication was that to the extent that the sidewalk needed to be widened or improved, that would fall onto the borough. I'm reading between the lines of what Mr. Hopkins testified to.
I mean, all I could, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, all I could say is the borough has no intention of doing that at this time. I can't say when Fairhaven Road will be done. I don't know if it'll be done within the next 5 years, 10 years. I don't know offhand.
Mr. Hopkins. Yes.
So, Volker, do we then just accept it as, I mean, there is a pole. I've been there. I visited the site. And to your point, Rich, it's in kind of, it takes up 1/3 of the sidewalk. So I don't think there's any intent to move the pole. And I doubt you can bow the sidewalk out onto Fairhaven Road. So are we going to accept it as it is? And it has been for a number of years. It was a bank way back. It was PNC Bank way back.
Bank. That's right.
Yes.
Well,
I think we have to address that.
I think the question is whether or not there's enough land inside of the pole to widen that sidewalk. And look, this is, I mean, you know, of all the properties that most people in Fairhaven put their feet on once a week, you know, this is one of them, including half the kids that go to our schools. So if the question is whether or not the sidewalk is as good as it can be, and whether or not there's ways to make it better, and whether or not that's prudent to do it, would now be the time. And what could be done?
Yeah, that's my point. There's a pole there, so you know, you would have to either route the sidewalk to the east of the pole, or route some of the sidewalk to the west of the pole, which would bring it out into Fairhaven Road.
Mr. Hopkins, how much room is left? Mr. Hopkins, how much room is left? I know you said the sidewalk was 4 feet. How much room's left in the right of way?
Let me measure that.
Looks to be about 2 feet, give or take.
That's correct. Approximately 2 feet, additional 2 feet from the edge of the existing sidewalk to the right of way.
And how close is the parking area to the end of the right of way?
Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I can share my screen of a photo, but I know the board probably can visualize it, but if we have the same picture in front of us, it might be helpful.
Sure.
Can you all see that now?
Yes.
Okay, so here's obviously the pole. The other issue is that there's a water meter here, and apparently, I guess when this was put in, the water company kind of took out some of the bricks and filled this in. So from this edge here, there's an additional 2 feet to the right of way. There's a bit of a curb taper here, which is also a little bit of an impediment. So even if we did widen this here, it would kind of create a tripping hazard.
This is a choke point. You know, I have not been focused on this until right now, but there is absolutely no question that this is a choke point. I go into the road here to let the kids stay up on the sidewalk, but it narrows significantly into a very busy intersection. And I'm just not seeing much use for it in terms of the operation of the property. Anybody else think this is an issue that we try and sort out?
Yeah, absolutely.
And Mr. Hopkins, what I'm looking at is a very minor curb adjustment that would permit us to widen that sidewalk 2 feet. Because of the telephone pole location, you know, you would actually, if you just captured the width of the pole, that 2 feet, you could make this a usable sidewalk.
I understand.
So, Walt, how would that be done?
The curb would have to be removed. 2 to 4 feet of the curb would have to be removed. reinstalled, possibly, depending on Mr. Gardello, what he would accept there as a depressed curb. And then this area would just be, as you can see, there is pavement here. So once we get this down to grade, we would just need to widen this out a little bit, basically in the area of this, a few square feet in this area of the water meter.
But just to be clear, I wouldn't stop it there. I'd go right forward. If you look in the picture, I think you'll see Bill Folker walking up to the next section of sidewalk. I would widen that further up there as well. It's just a garden bed, right?
Well, I'm not sure what the purpose of widening up here would be.
Is it not
Where your
the same
trash
4
is gonna
feet?
go? That's where you're talking about putting your trash cans.
No, they're inside of that.
No, the trash cans would be, I don't know if you can see my pointer.
Yeah, I see it. I see
Yeah,
it.
so it would be over in this area.
But it's the same general area.
Do you have the ability to move? Do you have a photo that's closer to the building from the same type of angle?
Let me see. You're testing the limits of my technical abilities here. That's probably not what I wanted to do.
Mr. Kovacs,
I don't know if that's any better.
Yeah, that's really good. Can you zoom that?
Well, that's a good perspective.
So this is the area there. You can see the pad. So we'd simply be putting fencing along here. So I don't know, the choke point, I think that Mr. Chair was referring to is back here where the pole is. So I don't know what additional widening and, with all due respect, this is all within the borough's right of way with the borough sidewalk.
Yeah, just to be clear, I'm not looking for a property grab, nor am I looking to lay responsibility on the property owner that is inappropriate, given what the application is tonight. I'm just focusing on it because it's a very heavily traveled path. Rich, what is a typical sidewalk width? What's safe?
4 feet is usually the minimum. If you can get 5 feet, that's obviously adequate. But once again, at the utility pole, it kind of bottlenecks there. And that was the point of my comment in my letter. The other thing you got to consider is the landscape bed has got a bit of a grade to it. So as you eat into that, there used to be railroad ties here, like where the no turn on red sign is, and it kind of came around the building. Those have been since removed by the current owner. So even looking at the other landscape bed to the south where the utility pole is, I think there's that pear tree. You got to be conscious of that, because once you start encroaching into that area, you got to hold the mulch back. It's not too difficult to do, but it's a little more involved with just adding, a row of bricks or so. I mean, looking at the photo, this water meter should be reset. Obviously, that's a temporary asphalt patch around it, and that could be a trip hazard. You can see where some of the bricks are uplifted from the roots of the trees, just maybe 3 or 4 feet beyond that. But then once again, you've got this curb taper, so you're gonna have to saw cut that back, reinstall something, and then hold this mulch bed back. But if we could try to achieve at least a 4-foot width, I don't know what it is now. It's pole's probably just over 12 inches. So you're probably under 36 inches there. So that's pretty tight. And you're entering, the other thing is you're right at a driveway. So you've got a lot going on there.
Rich, you said there's currently no plans to improve in this location, right?
Correct.
And you also mentioned in your letter, and you just said it again, that those railroad ties were installed as part of the beautification of River Road?
Yeah, back in '06.
I'm wondering if we don't want to try and set this up for some future date to be done, but to make sure that we've asked the applicant to get his stuff where it needs to be in order for us to have the opportunity to do it at one time. Like adjust that, put those railroad ties back, fix the grade so the space is there, and then adjust the concrete so it isn't encroaching in the area where the sidewalk will go.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, the borough's going to be taking care of the sidewalk on River Road. That's where most of the cost is. We're going to have to tear up, we're going to have to maintain a traffic pattern, get a backhoe in there, rip up sections of sidewalk. It's that scored decorative sidewalk, which is costly. Bricks are easy to install and expand, you get a pallet of bricks or whatever you need, and it won't take, you can even have a landscaper do it. You don't really need a mason, a qualified mason to do it. So, my focus was right here, this pinch point at the water meter, and to try to get some feedback from the applicant. But like they had stated, they weren't interested in doing anything at this time.
What about a pole relocation from an electric company?
Depends what's up there.
Is it a safety hazard?
My guess, well, you've got underground, you've got conduit coming down, so that's feeding something underground. Being it's on Fairhaven Road, it's probably got quite a bit up there, from a transmission standpoint. And to be honest with you, whether it's a Beltel or JCP&L, they're not usually too interested in relocating poles, unless it was absolutely, necessary.
Would they be interested in sharing costs? If they're not willing to relocate it, knowing it's a bottleneck, and maybe they want to relocate the pole, but you can say, hey, for the borough, you're screwing up my sidewalk and kids walk to school, so we got to resolve it somehow and cost share.
I think the cost is going to far exceed putting all new sidewalks from here to Red Bank. So it's costly.
Exactly.
Hey, Rich. What's that? I'm sorry, Jim.
I was just saying that's kind of my point. So, if you can say, hey, this is a safety hazard, blah, blah, it's going to be too costly to remove the pole. How about we work together and we redo the sidewalk kind of thing? That's
right. And the pole being right behind the curb is a typical location for a pole. So we wouldn't have much of an argument to try to go to the power company and say, can you put it back, 4 feet behind the, wherever, or even move it, further down the road.
Bill Folker, wouldn't we be achieving a lot, Rich, if we just dealt with the part that is south of the driveway entrance there, really, and just somehow came up with that 4-foot magical number that you have from the edge of the pole eastward? Whether you continue it the whole length along the south side of the bricks there or not, but I think if we addressed that one short point, being that would require the curb cut as well as an extension east of the the brick there in that regard, I think that would go a long way into at least accommodating the flow in a much more reasonable, safe manner than it exists today.
Yes, I agree. This is a very heavily pedestrian traveled area, and once again, putting in some bricks, it is somewhat of a low cost option.
Yeah, right. And as I said, the pole, the curb cut would be the biggest part of that. I'm not sure you're talking 1 foot or 2 foot. You would know better. But I think that would go a lot to alleviate it's a pretty dangerous situation, even for a walker, nevertheless a biker in that regard. So, and then I don't know how far south you'd continue that. Would it just be sort of a bubble, or would you actually continue it straight to the length of the edge of the property there, where it then picks up to the Navu's property?
Well, the bricks
Either way, bricks is the key. Yeah.
The bricks, if you zoom out of the photo a little bit, the bricks terminate at a concrete section, which I don't think it's, I don't know if
there you
that's
go. You're not talking that's 20 feet. That's a car length, and so it's 20 feet, 25 feet at most.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And by the way, your sidewalk, your concrete sidewalk there is that same basic width that we'd be talking about. So if you sort of have the carve around or a bubble around, you would have no worse than you were today as far as width of the sidewalk.
I got a proposal. My proposal is that we ask the applicant to install railroad ties or something else inside of the property boundary, enabling the area where the sidewalk is to be brought back to grade. if you look at the site plan, and I have it up on my screen, but I don't know if y'all have it in front of you. As the site plan shows it, that area where that water meter hole is,
Yeah.
everything that's to the left of that, to the road, it's about the same amount of property to the right that's available for a sidewalk. So you're gonna effectively double the width of that sidewalk. And if they put the railroad ties on the inside and just clip the curb, would prevent that, to keep it flat for us. We could then, Rich, I would suggest that either at our expense or just leave it alone, at least it's passable. And then I would do the same thing in the front section, have them pull the grade back with a railroad tie, even if we don't change the sidewalk at the moment, just so it's passable and available to us in the future if we do make improvements.
Yeah, that's a good idea. What we can do too is, since I have this contract coming out, which might be starting, within the next 30 days, when we get up to this area, we're doing River Road. If the side of the building is prepped, we could certainly do the concrete work. It's minimal. It's like a 18-inch strip of times, I don't know what's the length there from the from the driveway to
20 feet?
Yeah, those curb cuts are a couple of $100. It's mobilization, but you're already going to be there.
Exactly, and we're gonna have the concrete truck and traffic control and everything else there. So if they're willing to take care of bricks and what have you south of the driveway, we can look at the benefit of widening the sidewalk from the intersection to the driveway with concrete.
That would work.
Walt, Walt, do you understand? You understand what the request is?
I do. And if you don't mind me just restating it, can the board still see my screen?
Yes.
So in this area, I think what the board is asking is that the bricks be widened this entire length to the end of the property line?
Yes.
There's a couple
and what would that width be?
Mr. Hopkins, here's what the proposal is. Put railroad ties in, or some other, it could be a retaining wall, or railroad ties seem like the cheapest, inside of the property boundary, so that the grade of the sidewalk can be established, first of all.
Got it.
And the proposal was that the borough handle everything on the north side of your curb cut on Fairhaven Road, and we will widen the sidewalk, and we will handle the curbing into your parking lot to flatten it. And the request is then that you would finish the brick to widen between you and Nauvoo from there.
Okay. So again, this would be, we put retaining walls, however they may be, along this entire
Railroad
property
tie?
line?
Railroad tie?
Yes.
Along the entire property line along Fairhaven Road?
Inside of the property boundary, permitting the sidewalk grade to be level across the width of the borough right away.
Okay. So again, along the entire Fairhaven Road.
Right.
And then pavers from the driveway to Nauvoo, or wherever our property line is there.
Like kind bricks.
I understand what you're saying. It seems a bit much for a fence. I mean, we came in here with a fence, and I think what's being requested, the cost will far exceed what's being proposed.
I actually
just in balance, just to be fair.
Mr. Hopkins, we're very sensitive to this and are not looking to impose expenses where it's not necessary or where it's inconsistent with the requirements of the site. It's my understanding that there were improvements that were on this site that were installed by the borough that were removed by either the applicant or the applicant's contractors. Is that false? Is that not true? Because that's a big basis on the ask from my perspective.
I can't speak to that. I don't know what was removed. So I understand what you're saying, but I simply don't know.
Frank, are you on?
I am. I've been raising my hand because I don't want to interrupt anybody.
Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Walt, but I believe from the street, from the curb to the property line, the town owns the property. It's not a right of way. Up to my property line.
They mean the same thing. So that there's approximately 8 feet from the curb to your property line, which equals the edge of their right of way.
Okay. Look, my opinion is this. Yes, I agree with Todd that utility pole is absolutely a choke point. But it was there for 20 some years. I mean, we didn't have that installed. I have no issue if the town wants to widen and make a 4-foot radius off that pole, so it accommodates the foot traffic. That's fine. The only thing I would caution, or I'd be concerned about doing that, is there's a Bradford pear there, which are kind of weak trees anyways. If you open that too much, you're going to go into main roots. I'm afraid you're going to lose the tree, which I'm okay. You want to take the tree down? And I mean, when I say you, I'm not going to take it down. If you guys want to take it down and say, hey, look, we need to widen the sidewalk there, the tree's got to come down, I'm okay. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to fight you on that, but I'm not going to pick up the expense nor the work to take down a tree because you've got to widen your sidewalk. You can widen it, that's fine. You can cut that curb, that's fine. And the reason we took railroad ties up were that part of them were on our property and they were rotted. They were in bad shape. They were no longer in what I would consider proper condition for a retaining wall. Plus interspersed in between those, and some of you who are longtime residents of Fairhaven may remember them, there were probably about 3 foot tall, maybe as much as 4 foot tall lamp posts that were interspersed in between those ties. And they were not functioning. There were broken lenses. There were pieces we couldn't buy to replace. So they came up. The ties came up too. Like I said, I have no problem. Even if I own the property and your sidewalk needs to encroach on it, I'm okay with that. But I don't want to pick up the expense of doing it. If it's to me, I mean, it's as simple as when it was built, it should have been built to conform back then.
We don't know what the requirements were. I'm going to call you Mr. Frank. I kind of like the ring of that. I'm really sensitive to squeezing you to do something that's outside of the scope of what a typical review is. Mr. Kovacs and Mr. Gardella, I'm going to ask if there was a new tenant that was coming in here, what would be the requirements with regard to review of the sidewalk? At what point does the borough have the right to ask that the sidewalk be improved based on, whatever the standards are?
Change in use?
Excuse me?
Use was somehow impacting the sidewalk. I don't see that you have the ability to request the applicant to do that.
Well, if you assume that the change of use triggers a site plan requirement, what would we be looking at?
You'd be looking at the owner's responsibility for their property, not development in the right of way, unless we're requiring a curb cut or improvement of those sidewalks if they were in disrepair.
Residential properties in Fairhaven require a contribution to the sidewalk fund and require improvements to the sidewalks in the public right of way. I paid for a length of curb at 135 feet within the borough's right of way. Mr. Gardella, what ordinances do we have that cover this?
Like you said, we do have a sidewalk trust fund that if this, and that's assuming if there is no sidewalk and there's no sidewalk, it doesn't make sense to install the sidewalk, then that applicant would contribute. But in this case, that's for residential. In this case, from a commercial standpoint, we look at everything. We're looking at how the site is situated at the street, circulation pattern from a pedestrian standpoint. This property is right within our downtown. This was one of the things that was glaring to me right when I went out there when we first got this set of drawings. That water meter probably serves his property, so that needs to be dealt with too. That's a trip hazard. I don't know why it wasn't restored properly. I don't know why they put temporary asphalt in there. Maybe the prior owner just did not call New Jersey American and say, you need to come back and do this properly. I don't know. But what I do know is we have a sidewalk that is not compliant and width and probably ADA. And it wouldn't take much to make that a better situation. But I do recognize, as I mentioned earlier, that the tree, you got to be conscious of the tree. Bradford pears are a very fragile tree. So, and once again, the borough is willing to take care of the area out on River Road. That's a decent amount of cost. And I know the applicant had come to us with that request. And that's one of the reasons why I put it in the contract for the bid that we just awarded. We're gonna take care of those sidewalks.
But Rich, that sidewalk on River that's also within the right of way, correct?
It's within the county right away.
Yeah.
But but in that case, the borough, it's already 14 years ago, put those, they redid those sidewalks.
Well, my main focus, Mr. Brodsky, is the grade. I'm not aware of any easement. I see your hand, Mr. Volker. I'm not aware of any easement back into the right of way. And the problem is that because of the grade of the beds and the applicant's property, it's not suitable. So it kind of begins with getting the grade right and putting in either railroad ties or something else to pull it back. To me, that's the beginning. And then from there, it sounds like Rich is prepared to cover all the concrete work to take you all the way to the brick. And then, I don't know that we need to spend a lot more time on it, but we're talking about basically the railroad ties and the brick.
Frank?
I thought I was thinking of doing this part anyway. I was going to reduce the grade so it's not as high up off of the sidewalk and plane it down a little bit. Is that, to me, that it should solve the problem. It may not have the same look, but I was going to shave that, take that down because it's not soil right under the wood chips that I applied. There's probably 20 years of detritus, the decomposing wood chips under there. As if you went over and started scraping it, it's more compost than it is soil. So I just don't think it was prior to my ownership. I don't think it was ever maintained properly, and the beds were not cleaned properly, and that's built up over the years. I would shave it down to take some of the steepness away.
I agree. I think if there's, you never want to introduce a railroad tie or a small wall if you don't have to. If you can taper that back by grading it, or like you said, removing some of those wood chips, that would be the better solution. I think you've achieved that in the front where you took the railroad ties out. It looks like you regraded that, and that's been holding up. Probably bring it around the corner and do the same.
I will tell you right now, I've got no problem doing that, and I will tell the guy that the landscaper that takes care of the property to get that shaved down. I'll call him tomorrow because I'm up in Alaska. I know it's a little bit later back there in New Jersey than it is here, and but done.
All right, so we still have the question on the bricks, though.
Well, and Rich, I'm not understanding how much you're going to be able to get by way of a flat area. I would love to see that thing 6 feet with a a clear 4 feet inside of that pole, and then another foot or foot and a half gained, in the front, not because it's not the minimum, but because there's such a heavy amount of traffic there. I understand what you're saying about not using a wall if you don't have to.
Right.
But that means he's got to pull it back maybe 4 or 5 to get a grade that works. All right, Mr. Bordelon, you put your hand very far forward. What's up?
I don't think just cutting it to grade would work because you'd still have the curb up as a tripping hazard. So any work done right there would have to be combined with leveling out that curb to grade.
Yeah, at the driveway entrance there. Yeah.
Exactly, at the driveway.
The
That's what I'm
driveway.
talking about.
At the driveway.
Yeah.
Mr. Frank.
Okay, so similarly, on the north side of the driveway, there's another Bradford pear. And, you cut too far back because that one I think is even closer to the sidewalk than the one in the rear. That would be another complicating factor. I have again, if you want to, there's a pretty good picture of it. Again, I'm amenable if you guys say that tree's got to go in order for us to do the sidewalk work that we want to, widen by a foot or 2 feet, whatever you determine. I'm okay. If that's what's necessary, take it down. Again, I'm saying you guys take it down because it's nothing I'm looking to do. But as far as, me cooperating, I'll cooperate. I'm not going to fight you and say, no, you can't take, a foot of my property. I'm not going to fight that. I said, look, however we can work it out and be, there's a good picture of it. And work it out amicably, that's fine. So I won't, I'm not going to put up a screaming fit on that. If you have to shave the curb down on the north side of the driveway, similar to the south, I would say you guys do it when you have everybody there doing the work.
Mr. Gardella, can you, that picture is so helpful. Thank you, Mr. Huck. Can you help us understand what you're planning on doing inside of the right-of-way there on the northerly side of this?
Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to measure the existing width of the sidewalk. It looks to be more than 4 feet in width. The other thing, we've got this little curb piece as it comes around the inside of the radius.
Yeah.
So by widening that, that's going to be problematic.
That's the first thing I saw.
So I think this sidewalk, to me, is consistent with the width as it comes around River Road. So I think we're okay there. It's really just this pinch point. It might just be a matter of adding a little additional something to get you past that utility pole.
How about, is it possible to do it right at the pole? Right in the immediate vicinity of the pole? Like if we can get 4 feet by the pole?
That's what I've said.
Yeah, you would just transition it appropriately. So whoever's walking, or if they're in a, pushing a stroller.
Can I tell you something? I have walked down that road. You're looking at that telephone pole right there.
Mm-hmm.
It is very difficult to get a stroller through there. I've walked there with my grandchildren, especially with the double stroller. I think all you need to do is at that point, just widen it and not spend a gazillion dollars in talking about taking down nice trees. Just where that a water meter is, where that curbing is, just widen it and come back around to the sidewalk.
You blow it right into it.
Yeah, I think that's a good compromise. Walt, does that make sense to you?
Yes, have to cut the curb back a little bit. I think this is kind of where we started. Request that the water company reset this and, widen this out a little bit so that we get 4 feet. I think you're going to have your 4 feet of the driveway once we pull the curb back. So it's really just a small amount of area here of additional pavers, bricks, excuse me.
Right.
And then, since you're there,
You don't need to spend $1 gazillion. Just fix that point.
Yes, I agree. I agree with that. Because also, Betsy, if you continue that sidewalk down, if you can run that picture a little bit to the south, please. Run the picture to the south if you can, where it meets the concrete, There, that's the exact same width there. So you're not, so any suggestion that we need more width with the bricks, the concrete is no wider than that there also. So I think if you could bow it around that pole with what I think are the most sensible and most reasonable as far as cost to somebody,
Right.
I think that addresses the problem of entrance on or off or around that pole in a very safe manner.
Frank, are you okay with that?
Yeah, like I said, I'm perfectly fine. I don't care if it encroaches onto my property. We don't have to go through any, this, this might strike you in the heart, Rick, but we don't need a legal, matter
used
here.
to that.
I'm saying right now.
I'm used to that.
Go ahead. What's that?
I'm used to that.
Go ahead and do it. I'm okay. Go ahead and do it.
No, we're
no, you would.
Yeah, that's the issue. We've taken a grandiose idea of making this 2 feet wider for the kids, the length of your property, and cut it back to the bare minimum because the reality is we're trying to find a way to work around the existing improvements. And I think what we've all come around to now is, as a practical matter, the problem is the pole, the water thing, and it's a matter of probably 5 feet of making it wider, cutting the curb cut back, and finishing the sidewalk somehow to get it to where it's at least 4 to 5 feet wide in that area to get it down and across.
So we're talking. So we're talking about the bricks, adding additional brick in that area right by the pole and doing the curb cut. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yes, and then transitioning it in.
Yeah.
And then you might as well take care of the uplift of the roots here, which is literally a couple feet away.
But at the same time, don't destroy the tree. The trees.
Yeah, we don't want it.
It'll be fine.
Right.
Yeah, don't.
Yeah, it's minimal. It's minimal work. It's not going to impact the tree.
I'd also pull off any excess height. It's not clear to me at all that this is the height that this needs to be. It looks to me as if 5 years worth of adding mulch has resulted in 6 or 10 inches of additional height. I could be wrong, but I'd pull it down a little bit.
Yeah, as I said, I will absolutely pull down because I was going to do that anyway, so that's not an issue. With regards to widening it, I'm pointing with my finger because I don't think I have mouse control at the pole. A 4-foot radius off the front of that pole, north, south, and west of it is the way that
It's fine.
I would envision doing it. Or it being done, whatever. And again, I mean, I understand what you want to accomplish. I'm okay with you wanting to accomplish that. But again, I don't think I should bear the expense because it's nothing that was in the file on the property when I bought it. There were no violations. There were not, there was nothing that was a red flag as far as site condition. And I mean, we're not changing anything on the site. I personally, I take it as unfair to ask me to pick up the expense for something that's been there for 25 years.
This is Andrew. I actually agree, Mr. Frank. I think we're going above and beyond right now. What we're requiring of him to do. I'm just not seeing it. Maybe I'm missing something.
I agree. We're looking at a site plan change.
Or a change of use. I mean,
It's not even a change of use because we don't have a tenant. And it's really just bringing the site into compliance and seeking a variance for a fence height.
Yeah, I don't agree. There's been a user in that building for 2 years without a site plan approval. We're talking about an extremely minor modification to a sidewalk that's probably the most traveled in Fairhaven, but all board members' time is more valuable than this. We've talked about several solutions, and I think one should be implemented, but I don't want to spend any more time on it. We have the property. Right now, the existing bed that rolls into our property is creating a problem and a hazard because we don't have the full width of the 6 or the 8 feet. And I would suggest that we cut it back to where we have the right to do it. And if that water is a violation, then I think we should cite the violation. The curb cut is in the right of way and doesn't allow level traffic to pass. We should cut it, clip it. It's not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money.
Walt, do you have any feel for the cost?
I don't. Engineers don't like to shoot from the hip. I'm sure, unfortunately, it's too small to be a big job and too big to be a small job. So it does make it a little bit difficult. I'm sure it's in the thousands. I know that might come as a surprise, but to get a mason out there with a diamond saw to cut that curb the way that it should be cut, that's got to be at least $500 for that guy to show up. And to reset the bricks is probably going to just to get a guy to show up. It's got to be over $1,000.
Okay, this might be unconventional or not, but since the town, at least I think I understood Rich Gardella saying that there's going to be people out there doing concrete work and sidewalk work, even if it's on River Road, this is close enough proximate. Can we, and I don't, I'm sorry, I'm chuckling.
I know what you mean.
I think I know where you're going.
What I was going to say was, if you guys can have those guys do it and tell me, hey, Frank, this costs us an extra grand, I'll write you a check for the extra grand. I don't know how mechanically to do that.
Is there a mechanism in Mr. Gardella, is there a mechanism in the sidewalk fund to assess these improvements and accept that contribution?
Yes, we could actually go that route. If your applicant can get a cost estimate for the work, we could take a look at it and put those funds in the sidewalk fund, and then we can have our contractor do it. Is part of the problem with coordinating it and trying to get it, since it's such a small job, I think the challenge would be to just have somebody come out and do the work, because it's literally like 2 square yards. It's nothing.
Yeah,
I agree.
Right, it's a nominal amount of work. So if you've got somebody who's going to be there, you pick the date. He's going to be there November 1st, and you say, hey, do this little job. You're already there. I'm cool. I'll get somebody to give a rough price.
Why don't you, if the board sees it fit, as a condition, you obtain a quote from a qualified mason or landscaper to perform that work that we described.
That's
And
fine.
if we're in agreement, then that could be deposited in the sidewalk trust account.
And
I'm
we'll be
okay with
taking
that.
care.
I recognize Mr. Sobel's concern. I just want to comment that I would be okay putting a ceiling on it. I think that when we started this conversation, the idea was that we work together to make it safer for the people that travel here. So I don't know if $1,000 is the number, probably closer to $2,000, but I'm not suggesting that this should be something that would make anyone surprised that it would cost that. And I think the idea of having the borough contractor do it is a good one. That's a good solution.
I think 1,000 is more than adequate.
That's even better. I'm not looking to waste anybody's money.
Yeah.
Okay, and so $1,000. So can we even dispense with the go get a quote? I'll pay $1,000 into the sidewalk fund, and we have the handshake agreement that will cover it, and we have the 4-foot radius off the pole as a rough guideline of the size. I'll write you the check tomorrow. Well, I'll write it September 1st when I'm back in New Jersey.
Who moves the meter? We got to get the meter moved though, correct?
I could have, I have a unit price in my contract to do that.
Move the meter?
We would just reset it. It's not, it's
Okay,
not,
good.
it's not a big
Just
deal.
want to make sure we got that covered too there.
Yeah.
Okay. We got a reasonable solution here.
Rich, are you going to address the grade and make all of it a little more hospitable, even the area that you're not going to put in additional sidewalk? Are you handling that as well?
I already said I would.
You'll deal with that?
It sounds like the owner will do that, but we'll feather things back as appropriate if we need to, without causing any harm to the tree.
Good. All right.
I think we're good.
Mr. Brodsky, do you have anything further?
I'm good with it. Frank, did you work in real estate ever? That was a good idea. Frank's a long time.
35 years.
Yeah.
Mr. Paola, I want to thank you for bringing that issue up. I think that was an important issue, and I think that we almost missed it. I'm glad we're going to get that buttoned up. It feels good.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. We have an open question with regard to the nature of the fence itself. It's going to be 42 or 48 inches, and then it's going to be 50% open or it's going to be solid. I assume if it's going to be solid, Mr. Brodsky, it's a similar style. It's got the 2 rails top and bottom, but it's just solid all the way through?
That's correct.
I would agree to 48 inches as long as it was 50% open or somewhat open.
There you go. Okay. You going to make that motion, or does anybody else want to talk that through with Andrew?
I think if you're going to make it solid, there's no sense in it being 6 inches short where you're going to see the top of the can. So my opinion is you go to 48 inches and you make it solid so you don't see the utilities or the cans.
I agree with that. Let's take a straw poll. Go around the box. Go around Hollywood Squares. Michael, we know where you are, right? 48 inches and solid?
Correct.
Borderline, where are you?
48 and solid.
48 and solid for me. I'm Jim.
David?
48 and solid as long as it doesn't create an airflow issue around the HVAC unit.
That question was asked and answered. I don't know how much distance you need. It's probably a foot or 18 inches. Anybody know technically?
2 feet.
2 feet?
Yeah.
Mr. Frank, you got 2 feet?
Hold on, I have to respond on that.
Ms. Koch, you're not on mute. Nice try.
I believe I have more than 2 feet from those units to the end of my property line. So as far as the fence goes and putting it up and having proper spacing around the HVAC units, I'm fine. I've got the space for it. I'll just so the fence will be whatever distance the edge of the units are away from the building, 2 feet beyond that. Walt, I hate to task you with it, but if you have a scaled plan in front of you, you could tell the town, hey, that's a 8 feet off the building. I don't know what it's going to be.
Does anyone have that picture of the fence that was previously on this shared screen?
Of the proposed fence?
Yes.
Sure. Share the screen. So this was the open fence that was proposed?
Yes.
That looks so nice.
we've
Those
introduced
fence
a
will
new,
look nice too.
we've introduced a new idea.
It's not in perspective.
We've introduced a new idea. If you need 2 feet around the AC, then I think what I'm hearing is that the fence may come closer to the street, which I don't know is a reasonable trade. I not wild about where this stuff is. I thought that the fence was going around the concrete pad and in the same location it was.
Well, it was.
And then there was some suggestion that because it was a closed fence, that it may require some airspace. I think if it's an open fence, that's a moot point.
You're correct.
Now,
So therefore, I
the
didn't get the
old
vote.
fence,
I didn't get the vote, but I vote for the slotted fence.
Thank
The
you,
old-
Bill.
the old fence, guys, was about a foot off of the end of the concrete pad.
What's the benefit, Mr. Frank, of having the fence anywhere other than exactly at the concrete pad?
Well, I guess for just service, to service the
Yeah.
HVAC units, for a guy to be able to fit in there.
All right, Mr. Hopkin, the proposed location for the fence as it stands is how far off of the concrete pad? I'm looking at it, but there's not a measurement I can see.
It's scaling just over a foot, but I think we could agree to a foot.
Okay. And does that provide the 2 feet that you need for airflow, or does it not?
I'll double check, but I think it's pretty close. I mean, we have this shown schematically. When you do small scale surveying of an AC unit, it's showing a few inches off of the edge. I'd have to verify that, but it would be close.
But is that for, again, a solid fence, or is that also for a slotted fence?
Well, it's up to the board's discretion.
I understand, but that airflow issue, is that an issue with a slotted fence or only an issue with a solid fence?
The solid fence, you need 2 feet on each side
Exactly.
of the, yeah, you need 2 feet on each side
That's
of
all.
the HVAC condenser.
Right. Now, if it's a slotted fence, I believe I heard that we do not need that 2 feet because it has airflow naturally through the slots.
Correct. The only thing that would be, have to be taken into consideration then is the location of the fence to the unit for somebody to get in there and service it.
That's right. Exactly. Okay. So that's consistent with either solid or slotted.
Right.
Mr. Folker, I don't mean to disparage your comment, but I doubt that the board or anybody walking along there would be able to tell the difference between 1 foot off of the edge of the pad and 2. I think it would be really hard.
I agree. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree. I think aesthetically, I would vote for the slotted fence.
I, just for ha-has, went on Carrier's website and they list for a wall, a solid object. If you're shrubbery, you could be within a foot, but they suggest for a wall that's solid, where you're not going to pull as much air through it, it's going to go above it, and to be 16 or 18 inches. And you said for argument's sake, for a foot, you might be more than a foot, so you're probably where you need to be anyway.
Yep.
All right, I'd vote for solid in the location proposed.
Second.
Anybody want to keep arguing, or should I just make the motion?
Make the motion.
Make the motion.
All right, I'm going to make the motion to approve the application for an amended site plan. Insert data here. The approval would be inclusive of 2 variances. 1, to permit the fence proposed on the plan to be 48 inches versus 42, and for the fence itself to be solid material versus 50% open as required by the ordinance. And the approval would be conditioned on a contribution of $1,000 to the sidewalk fund so that the borough can administer the improvements to the sidewalk area around the telephone pole as discussed, to be finalized by Mr. Gardella in the field, anywhere within the right of way that's appropriate to widen that for safety, and further conditioned on the applicant regrading the area to the south of the curb cut to Fairhaven Road in order to permit a level area within the borough right of way subject only to what may need to be kept in place to preserve the health of the significant tree that's in that landscape bed. You get all that, Doug?
Signage, striping, and a site triangle also.
It conditioned further on compliance with the requirements of the engineer's letter and further compliance. McKinley, was there anything in your letter that wasn't picked up on? Anything that didn't overlap that needed to be covered?
No, Mr. Chairman, everything was either covered or overlapped.
Thank you.
The only thing I would add is compliance with Historic Commission, since now we're changing the type of fence. I don't know if they reviewed a solid fence.
Hey, excuse me. With all due respect, I'm ready to go with this tomorrow. I don't want to wait 30 or 60 days to meet those guys and get their input. It's already, you know, you guys, the board, are voting affirmatively to break the code, or you know, whatever, you know, vary from the code.
Anti-variance.
Vary from the code with a solid fence. I will commit to this. I'll use the same or a similar quality fencing and material, you know, but I don't want to wait anymore. I mean, this fence would have been up, you know, 2 years ago if, you know, if things were different. You know, but that doesn't matter. I will put up a high quality fence.
Wait, hold on. Mr. Frank just totally alerted me to the fact that I've messed this completely up. I was so ready to vote. I rushed into a motion. I never even opened it to the public. Mr. Kovacs, thank you for texting me on my phone and reminding me of that. I would like to just pause for a second and ask whether or not there's any members of the public that have any comments or any questions with regard to the application. Susan. Going twice. All right, we're good. Mr. Frank, your comment with regard to the Historical Commission is understood. You did approach the Historical Commission regarding the fence that you provided as a proposal tonight, right? And they asked you to use that fence with a treatment to make it look less like PVC and more like wood, correct?
Not with a treatment, but that's a different fence material than the one I originally proposed to them. One of their committee members, Jim or Jay, I don't remember his name, specifically said Intech fencing, the type I picked and provided, has a higher density, not a shiny white plastic PVC look. It's got more like a matte finish, and it's a heavier duty fence. Which I said, you know, immediately, fine, I'll do that. I will do the same if they offer it, same fence company, same material, but solid instead of 50%. I have no issue with that. I'm sure, you know, I bet almost anything on it that what I put up will, material-wise, they may not be happy with the solid versus open, but I guarantee you the material will be the same and they won't have the complaint about the material.
Does anybody feel strongly about the Historical Commission? Even if they said they prefer it open, I think we've debated that issue, and I think that from what I polled, the majority thinks the solid's better.
I think we should go with what we decided.
Okay. And Rich, I thank you for bringing it up, but I don't think we should condition it on that. But I will clarify, Mr. Kovacs, with regard to the motion, it would be conditioned on the fence being from the same manufacturer, the same material as proposed. It would be the same style of fence, just solid instead of pickets.
That works.
That's fair.
That concludes my motion. I need a second.
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 Second, Koch. Roll call when you're ready.
Bordelon?
Yes.
Mr. Borneo?
Yes.
Mr. Folker?
Yes.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Mrs. Koch?
Yes.
Mr. Newell?
Yes.
Mr. Sobel?
Yes.
Mr. Rolfe,
Thank you, Mr.
Yes.
Mr. Paolo,
Yes.
Mr. Leader.
Yes.
Thank
Okay.
you, Mr. Chair, members of the board.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time and your patience.
Thank you
Yep,
for your
thanks
time.
very
Have a
much,
good
guys.
night.
Thank you.
Everybody stay safe.
Thank you, Mr. Frank.
All right, bye-bye.
Good night.
All right, Mr. Sobel, we got an administrative item you're going to knock out for us?
Sure. Let's see. I make a motion to approve the minutes from the July 21st, 2020 meeting.
Second,
Borderline,
Yes.
Mr. Borneo,
Yes.
Mr. Folker,
Yes.
Mr. Engel,
Yes.
Mrs. Koch,
yes.
Mr. Sobel,
Yes.
Mr. Rolfe,
Yes.
Mr. Paolo,
Yes.
and Mr. Leader.
Yes.
All right. Even though I'm still unhappy about the closed fence, I'll continue. I don't believe there's any correspondence at this time. Mr. Chair, if you correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm not aware of no correspondence.
Jen, any correspondence? No. Mr. Kovats, any correspondence?
None.
No. Okay. Make a motion to open the meeting to public comment.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, open for public comment.
No comments from Susan? She's the only one here.
All right. Well, make a motion to close the public comment for the meeting.
So moved.
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Seeing none. I don't believe there's a need, Mr. Kovats, for any executive session. Is that correct?
Correct.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Hold on, before you do that, because I've sensed that we all have lost interest in what we're doing. I just want to say, I know sometimes it's hard to get there. I know sometimes you're dealing with the applicant and who's going to pay for it, whatever we wound up in tonight. It's a really important spot, guys. I really think it's important to have spent that time. And I know that that fence even seemed like we were tiring of wanting to talk about it. Everybody sees that fence. So I thank everybody for their patience. I apologize when it goes long. I hope that when we go long, we're focusing on things that matter. I think we did tonight. Maybe we went an extra 20 minutes. So maybe your bourbon's going to be a little watery by the time you get to it. But I thank everybody for hanging in.
I should have made
Todd, I
made an application for a variance for my fence when I was replacing my fence. I put a 42-inch open fence. I'm not happy about it still today.
But I think
I'm going to send a $5,000 landscape bill to you, Todd.
Add it to the list.
Make a motion
Todd,
to adjourn the
just a
meeting.
comment.
Yeah,
No, hold
Mr.
on, Todd, just a comment. I think your point's well taken. I don't think anybody underestimated the importance of that little corner there, particularly for the safety of whether it be kids or adults. So, and I think that the solution we came to was one of the better ones. It makes a lot of practical sense, and it will address the concerns, the immediate concerns of making that wide enough and passable for Betsy in her double stroller, kids on the bicycle, you walking your kids to school. So
But
I
it
think
was
we actually
also-
came up with
It was also the least expensive
exactly
solution.
reasonable, very reasonable yet safe and effective compromise.
Sidewalk.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is, as Frank came to the table and offered to sort of help with the budgetary easing on this project too also. So I think we did a decent job on this one to accomplish what we needed to do.
All right. Anything further for the good of the order?
Make a motion to adjourn.
So
All in
moved.
favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks a lot,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Have a great
Have
night.
a good rest of your summer, okay?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Night,
enjoy.
everyone. Thanks
Stay
all.
inside.
Enjoy the rest of the summer.
Right.
Bye-bye.